السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. كان الله بي كيف بلا كيف ولا مكان. وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد خير الأنام. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا دائما أبدا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ونعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع. اللهم طهر قلوبنا من الرياء والنفاق. اللهم نور قلوبنا. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Brothers and sisters Islam, alhamdulillah, this is the last of the sessions that we will be having about the prophetic way of activism, much of it based upon this small booklet that I wrote a few years ago, about 5 years ago or so, called Towards Sacred Activism. And before going over the last chapter, and actually it relates to this last chapter, and answering any questions that you all may have in particular about this topic even from the beginning that maybe you want some clarification on or wanted me to elaborate upon further, I cannot stress enough that as Muslims in general, but any who plan on going to activism or being a part of activism and community organizing, the importance of sacred knowledge. And as I stated before, that all of our scholars say that is a prerequisite of enjoying and good and forbidding evil is one must have the necessary prerequisite knowledge of ma'ruf and munkar, about on any issue that one is advocating on behalf or advocating against. And as I mentioned before, there's a hadith mutawatir. It's narrated by at least 10 different Sahaba. May Allah be well pleased with them. There's no hadith Jibreel. And when our beloved Prophet ﷺ was sitting with some of Kibar Sahaba, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Abdullah ibn Abbas, this is in Medina, Abu Huraira, big Sahaba, that there was a being that came looking like a man, wearing exceedingly white garments, and he came and he sat down with the Prophet ﷺ, to the extent that one narration said that their legs were actually touching. In the riwayah of Umar, the first question was, what is faith? Mal Iman. This represents the absolute necessities of what we must understand to be proper Muslims. Right? What is faith? So go back and review this. All of you should study this hadith with a proper teacher. What is faith? This is the absolute necessary requirements for what it means to be a Muslim. Then what is Islam? This represents al-ahkam, meaning it generally is talking about the 5 pillars, but again, there is rules around the 5 pillars. And by extrapolation, there are rulings for all matters of life, such as marriage, such as other fiqh mu'amalat, right? Even conducting business. There are rules. Allah did not leave us without guidance in this world, in order. And then, what is al-ihsan? Mal-ihsan. To worship Allah as if you see Allah. If you do not see Allah, know that Allah sees you. And this represents suluk. the knowledge of spiritual welfare, or some call this as zuhd, the knowledge of detaching one's heart from everything else other than Allah. This is what zuhd really means in reality. It's mistranslated as asceticism. Or it can mean tazkiyah, or tazkiyatun nafs, or tahdibatun nufus. There are different words used, right? Tasawwuf, whatever word you prefer. It's the sciences of the inward, of cleansing the inward self. So these are the three sciences that makes up, that we must study in order to practice Islam thoroughly, from belief to our rituals to striving to be ethical human beings. Right? Within saying this, in activism circles, and I've gone through some trainings, people talk about self-care. You all have heard of this term self-care before, sisters, brothers? Normally, when self-care is talked about, it's within the context of make sure that you eat proper food, have good nutrition, make sure you get proper rest, make sure that you detach from work, take vacation, things like this. In activism spaces, rarely if ever, you will hear the terminology spiritual self-care. It's all based upon, to simplify it, the body and the mind, but there's no talk about the soul, the spiritual self-care. So it is necessary for us to look after ourselves. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu alaykum anfusakum. We are obligated to take care of ourselves. Qu anfusakum ahlikum nara. Save yourselves, protect yourselves, and your family from hellfire. So your first obligation, to take care of your own souls. And then after trying to save your own soul, to save or to try to protect your families. SubhanAllah, if we only fulfilled these two commands, we would enter the Jannah. If we fulfill these properly, right? Nonetheless, we do have an obligation towards society, and we talked about this earlier. What are the first steps? First of all, to strive to implement our fara'id, our basic religious obligations. And these start with the 5 daily prayers. And then these 5 daily prayers means then making them on time. I'll tell you a sad story, is when 47 was running, at the time he was 45 elect. He's 47 elect now. And in New York, one of our aunties was at this Get Out the Vote drive, and she was there all day. And it was a group of organizers. They were sitting back phone banking and making all these calls to get out the vote for the election. And she told the story. She said that afterwards, she started crying. And they went to her. The auntie is Auntie Aisha Adawiya. I don't know if some of you all know her or not. She's in Harlem. And they asked her, like, Auntie, why are you crying? And she said, SubhanAllah, we've been here since early this morning. And it was Salat time, Salat al-Dhuhr, Salat al-Asr, Salat al-Maghrib, Salat al-Isha. And not one time did anyone here call for a break to go pray. Everyone was on the phone, joking around and laughing. She's like, by Allah, this community will never have success or tawfiq if we can't even establish jama'ah and pray our prayers on time. Doesn't matter how much phone banking we do. And I wasn't there as a witness, but I heard this, and I said, it's sahih. I said, Auntie Aisha was correct. And then after that, our nawafil, devotions. So yes, we have to make our 5 daily prayers on time. Maybe some of you are under the nisab, but not religiously obligated to pay zakat. Not sure. If you are, yes, you need to pay zakat. All of you are mukallifin according to the Sharia. All of you are adults in here. There's no kids in here. The obligations of fasting, right? Beyond that, the nawafil. To implement these, such as praying our sunnah prayer after our daily prayers, and of the two sunnah that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never missed, even while traveling, is praying the 2 units of prayer, the rak'atain, before Salat al-Fajr, and praying Salat al-Witr after Isha. He never missed these prayers, according to our mother Aisha. He never missed these prayers, even while traveling. So we to try to strive to fast at least 3 days every Islamic month outside of Ramadan. This should be a goal or objective. Why? Because we need a connection to our Creator. And we connect to our Creator through this ibadah. And this was primary and most important, right? As a Muslim, as an activist. And I'm saying this because all of the worldly striving that we are doing, or we think we're doing, or the dunyawi striving, the first hukuk, or the first rights that we owe, is not creation. The first rights that we owe are not our brothers and sisters in Palestine, or African Americans locked up in jail unjustly, or police brutality, or whatever. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. We're supposed to regard Allah as He should be rightfully regarded. It is Allah who has the first rights that we owe Him as religious obligation and as an issue of adab. So we can try to fulfill other people's rights. If we are slacking or not even striving to fulfill our hukuk towards Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and we're trying to get other people their rights, we got it twisted. Our priorities are screwed up. Excuse my language. Our priorities are messed up. So we have to get our priorities in check if we want to have proper sacred activism that conforms with the Quran and the Sunnah and our righteous predecessors. This is the first piece of advice of spiritual self-care. The second thing is our suhbah, our associations. Outside our ibadah, the greatest influence on our ahwal, or spiritual states, relates to the company that we keep. A hadith narrated by Al-Hakam and Nisaburi. He's one of the great hadith scholars of Ahlul Sunnah. He did a collection of hadith that met the conditions of Al-Bukhari and Muslim that Imam Bukhari and Muslim left out. It's called Al-Mustadrak al-Sahihain. Shamsuddin al-Dhahabi, the student Ibn Taymiyyah, did tahqiq, or verification of the hadith in this book. On the authority of Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, being alone is better than being in bad company. And being in righteous company is better than being alone. I'll repeat that 2 more times. Being alone is better than being in evil or bad company. And being in righteous company is better than being alone. Being alone is better than being in bad company, and being in righteous company is better than being alone. So we have the story in Sotul Kaf. For instance, a group of Shabab, people on your age, was in a society that became so corrupt, they literally made khuruj and left the society and went to a cave, a literal cave, right? Because all the company society was so corrupt. Most of the people in society were corrupt. These were the only upright people within their society at the time, these few young men. So they went. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful of is also when we're talking about activism, that we need to also keep company and be with people who aren't simply activists. Because what happens is there becomes what's called silos. You ever heard this term before, silos or echo chambers? You start hearing a bunch of people start talking a particular way. And in most activism circles, most people aren't talking about sacred activism, or they aren't grounded in our tradition, even though and they can be Muslims, that will start using the nomenclature and language predominantly of the far left. They'll start using neo-Marxist language without even knowing it. They'll just repeat things. The next thing you know, the influence of the echo chamber of silos will begin to influence your spiritual state and thinking. Therefore, there has to be some extrication and to go in some other spaces, number one, for our spiritual health, and that two, that we can hear some different thoughts and different ideas, that we don't get caught up in the echo chamber. I think I used this example before. It's really a Dajjalic saying. How have you ever, I mentioned this before, that saying, my body, my choice. Ever heard it before? Is that an Islamically compliant slogan? Sisters, you can disagree. It is not an Islamically compliant slogan. The Women's March used that term. Leish. I'm asking a question. Why is that not an Islamically? I'm trying to give you an example of how when you're in these circles, how you can hear things. Oh, that sounds cute. That sounds nice. You start repeating it. The next thing you know, that leads you into other thoughts or ideas that go against Islam. Sister, it's not our bodies. Our bodies are not our property. Anything else? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns our bodies, and our bodies are a what from Allah? An amana. They're a sacred trust, in which there is what? There is mas'uliyah, responsibility, judgment. Lillahi ma fi samawati wa ma fi al-ard. Everything in the heavens and the earth belongs to who? Allah. Kul inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin. Surely my prayer, say to the people of Prophet, surely my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, and my death all belong to Allah. What else is there? Yeah, and so that's it. There's nothing else. Even I think I mentioned before, even in property law in Islam, to own something, you have to do what? You either have to manufacture it, you have to purchase it, or it has to be bequeathed to you either through a will or as a hadiyah, a gift. Did we manufacture ourselves? La. Did any of you purchase yourselves in here? Were any of you slaves and bought yourself? No. Did you inherit? Did someone leave you as an inheritance? No. Did someone gift you? Your mom birthed you, but you're not a gift. We're all gifts from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, but like your mom didn't give you life as a gift. Qadr Allah wa ma shafa'a. So our bodies don't even belong to us. It's an amana, it's a trust. Even from a property law aspect. And I'm saying that some of you are laughing, but I'm serious. And it goes for the same thing of the anti vax jabbers, because they copied the feminist thing. They started saying "my body, my choice" when they wanted to mandate the COVID-19 vaccines to fly, and people started chanting "my body, my choice." I don't know if you remember that. So anyway, we have to be careful about. My point is the company that we keep and not be in silos, and that we should try to be in circles of dhikr and circles of learning. And some of us may say we're very busy, we don't have time to, we can't afford it. My response is, can you afford not to? I don't mean monetarily, I mean for your soul, for my soul. The other thing is relating to this, getting a spiritual mentor, a spiritual guide. I say this all the time. As Sophia has a nice saying, I like this saying. They said, whoever takes themselves as a sheikh, shaitan becomes their sheikh. Because all of us need guidance. Fi Soto Kaf, one of Ulul Azm al-Rusul, Kalimullah Musa alayhi salam, right before the part about Dhul Qarnayn, what does Musa alayhi salam do? Anyone? He sees an elder and he goes to this elder and asks this elder to be his what? His murshid, his spiritual guide, his mentor. Now, what's the ibra in this? Musa alayhi salam, number one, and Nabil Ma'soom. He was a prophet that Allah protected him from the intention of disobeying his Lord. This is what the Aqidah of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the true people call themselves Sunnis. Al-Anbiya Usimu and Al-Hawa. Prophets are what? They are protected from the desire of caprice, a caprice of disobeying their Lord. Prophets are human beings, they made mistakes, but it wasn't willful act of disobedience, like how sometimes we may actively and consciously disobey. It's not the maqam of prophets. So number one, he was ma'soom. Number two, he had a book revealed to him, a Torah. And Angel Jibreel alayhi salam came to him. And any of us getting a book? No. If you believe a book's coming to you, you're on kufr. You go to a teacher. Quran's the last book. Is Jibreel alayhi salam going to come to you and give you a one-on-one dars? Probably not. Are any of us ma'soom or ma'sooma in this room? No. Or even in how it means in Urdu, because ma'soom means innocent. No. No. Therefore, since Nabi Allah Musa alayhi salam needed a spiritual guide or a spiritual teacher, and he was a messenger who was protected from error, we'd be foolhardy to think that we, as people being involved in activism, don't need a spiritual mentor, a spiritual guide. It's actually delusional. It's delusional. And why do we need the spiritual mentor or spiritual guide? And we're not talking about blindly following anyone. We are all obligated to understand the basics of Aqidah, like is mentioned in Hadith Jibreel, and to know our Fard Ayn, which I mentioned earlier, our individual obligations. You all must know the rules of Tahara, right? How to make wudu properly, how to make ghusl properly. When do you make wudu? When about making ghusl? Sister, the difference between hayd and istihada. When you have your regular cycle, or then if there is some fluid that's coming after your regular cycle time, how do you purify yourself? When do you know it's the proper time to pray, even if there's still something, according to one of the established madhahib, not Sheikh bin Gu. Right? What happens? There is no water. What represents Sa'id, the pure earth, to make tayammum? Like, what does that mean? What does that mean according to the different rulings? What can you use? Can you just go to the wall and wipe the wall? Well, if there's a plant, can you wipe a plant? There's actually differences of opinion on this. But you have to know, according to one of the established madhab, right? Prayer. What invalidates prayer? Is it just wudu or say tahara? What about if there's najasa on your clothing? What constitutes najasa, or ritual impurity? What about praying on something that is not tahir? So this is not, you learn from a sheikh or a teacher, but this is not just the job of the imam to know. Each and every one of you is supposed to know these rulings. And sisters, you have more to learn than brothers, unfortunately, because of those sisters. Well, they said that Allah says the male is not like the female. So there's different issues. So you get to learn some of these issues. And if you become a student of knowledge or a sheikh, when you lead sisters on Hajj or Umrah, you gotta know these questions too, because sisters will come to you with these questions. This happened to me, because I've led Umrah groups and had sisters come to me to the side, oh, sheikh, such and such. You can't be bashful or shy, so sister, don't ask me the question about your haid. That's not how it works. So we have to know these things, okay? So, but the spiritual guide is for two primary reasons. Number one, to break us of our nefs, of our ego. As I think I mentioned before here or somewhere else. Su ego es no su amigo. Your ego is not your friend. Right? And the figure in the Quran that sums up, the human being that sums up the ego that calls towards sin or wrongdoing is Fir'aun. Qala ana rabbukumu a'la. He said, I'm the Most High Lord. So he didn't have to submit to anyone. I'm the Most High Lord. Fir'aun, by the way, made a statement that even Iblis didn't say. That's when the ego can turn a person from a regular human being to a shaitan in the form of an insan. Because there are shayateen, min al-jinni wal ins. There are devils from jinn and human beings. Right? There are devils, not just spirits we can't see. There are shayateen walking around who are white, yellow, red, brown, and black. May Allah protect us from becoming shayateen. The second is that when we have an issue that we need to ask, that we can go to someone and ask questions and not just only rely on ourselves. So there aren't many complete shuyukh. And when I say shuyukh, I also mean like an ustadha or sheikha. I just don't mean men when I say the shuyukh. But a spiritual guide is this. Number one who you see outwardly or publicly is salih or salihah, someone who's upright. Someone who you see in general who are striving to fulfill the rules of the Sharia. Someone who does not have scandals surrounding their names. It's preferable, sisters, that you try to find a sister if possible. And brothers, to find a brother if possible. Also, someone who has studied this deen, who has studied sacred knowledge, is also for the spiritual guide. And this person should be someone who has general ijazah and or can produce some sort of idhn or permission from teachers. It just can't be someone that you come across and seems eloquent, who speaks Arabic and maybe has tens or hundred thousands of followers on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. That doesn't make someone a proper guide. There's a whole lot of charlatans online, by the way. You got YouTube and TikTok sheikhs, right? If you can't find that person in your locality, then you try to find someone who's an elder, who you know to be upright, upstanding, a regular musalli, and you try to ask that person if you could sit with them, once a week or once every other week, and try to get their mentorship and to ask them questions. And especially if those of you from immigrant backgrounds, never make fun of I said before, don't make fun of the uncles or aunties in the masjid who speak with an accent as if they're backwards and they have no good in them. I hate hearing that. Never disrespect your elders. If you disrespect your elders, that disrespect's going to come back on you with the next generation. Believe me, what goes around comes around. Do not disrespect your elders, uncles, and aunties, and mock them behind their backs. Don't do that. So spiritual mentorship is part of spiritual self-care. Also, try to get a daily litany where you sit to yourself and you do some sort of dhikr or salawat. So for instance, I was told by one of my teachers to send no less than 1,000 salah upon the Prophet and his family, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a day, 1,000 times a day. And on Jum'ah day to increase it, 1,000 times at night, 1,000 times a day. Or you do a litany like the wird of Imam an-Nawawi, for instance. Sit and do that like after Asr or one time a day. It takes some time just to be with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Or to read Yasin. Sit and read Yasin every day. Make that your daily spiritual routine or your litany. And read it. You can read it with varying forms of intention with Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, I intend to read this Surah Yasin to purify myself. Ya Allah, I'm reading this Surah Yasin to bring barakah into my life. Ya Allah, I'm reading Yasin to bring illumination to my heart. And read Yasin. Try to find something that you're going to stick to and do it every day. A spiritual litany or routine with hudur, with consciousness in the heart, not this dhikr, and it just becomes tongue exercise. I mentioned the fasting already. Structured acquisition of Islamic knowledge, I mentioned that already. And for those of you who have learned your Fard 9, then I suggest then try to study with someone to study Usul Fiqh, because Usul Fiqh will give you a framework or an epistemology about how to approach knowledge. See, there is something called objective truth. Objective and subjective. Okay, what happens when you have the truth? How do you process that truth to lead to a rational conclusion? Just having a bunch of facts in and of themselves may not lead to good, sound conclusions. So there needs to be a methodology of how we look at the world, to look at truth, how to implement truth. And Usul Fiqh meets this requirement. It gives an epistemology or a framework of how we approach the truth, how we judge what's truth. I mentioned the Salat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam already. This is the most efficient way of raising our spiritual stations. Try to go on a spiritual retreat to get away from general activities, and it's better to do these things in nature. And when you try to go on a retreat, I don't mean one of these acronym conferences. It's not a retreat. You're going mingling amongst 10,000 other people. It's not a mass, or no, that's not a retreat. I'm talking about going somewhere structured, either alone, just to think or contemplate from Murataba, or going for a small spiritual retreat with a teacher and try to go outside of nature and to do your best to sit your phones down and not look at your phones or computers constantly. Maybe take a break and look at your phone maybe 2 or 3 times a day max, but not going through all this scrolling and responding to all these text messages. We have a problem with stillness of the heart, concentration, because we're on phones too much. So it's hard for us in this modern day and time to keep our concentration, much less focus on the ayat of Allah, because the creation are signs of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. He's a dhahir. He manifests his order and his will through the creation. Because we are too caught up on phones and scrollings and anti-social media and WhatsApp groups. Spiritual retreats, and I try to take at least 1 or 2 of these a year myself. Also, we have a few more points. I gave 12 points. Resist the urge to try to apply to reply or have an opinion about every controversial issue you hear in the community or on social media. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Men samata najah." Whoever stays silent shall be saved. We don't have to weigh in and have an opinion about every single issue that comes up or every single social media scandal or controversy. For instance, this Quran teacher that got caught up in something recently. I didn't even heard of that guy until someone sent me a text. Never heard of him. Right? There's a public interest about knowing certain things, but there's also something that is said where the Prophet ﷺ says, from the beauty of a person's Islam is to leave alone what doesn't concern him. We don't have to comment on everything. We don't need to have an opinion on everything. That's part of the illusion of social media. We think we can just comment on everything because we have the capacity or ability to. That's spiritually unhealthy. Try to remind yourselves every day, throughout the day, mark some time throughout the day. Maybe it's in your muhasabah, your spiritual self-inventory. And this is good for activists in particular, that all we are charged with is to have clean intentions, to act upon the best of those intentions with knowledge, and we leave the results of all outcomes with Allah. We are not the ultimate determiners of outcomes. Nothing happens in this creation without Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala's qadr or his idhn, his permission. And many activists get burned out because they do all this work and then, 47 won. Or if VP, what's her name, won. Or, we tried to do this phone banking thing and we didn't hit the mark. And this is how activists get burned out and fall into despair, because they end up thinking, but just because of all their hard work, they thought that guaranteed an outcome, or that they should have an outcome. No, the outcome's with Allah. And maybe Allah delayed the outcome we wanted because there's a hikmah of divine wisdom in it. Even what's going on in Palestine right now in Gaza is with the permission of Allah. Even that is going on with the permission of Allah. And for the people of Gaza, there's an ibtila in it, or a trial or a test. and we are being tested. Maybe our test is more severe than their test, but we can't fathom it. Their iman is higher than our iman, generally speaking. I believe that 100%. But Allah knows best. And I know, see, the activists of the political world will tell you something differently. You know, your campaign is successful if it's based in virtue ethics, right? Akhlaqiyatul fadila. That's when it's successful. Again, you have a good opinion, you have a good intention, a righteous maqsad, you're acting upon knowledge based upon the sacred law. That in of itself is virtuous and successful. The outcomes are not in our hands ultimately, no matter how hard we try. And that's hard for some of us to stomach. It's an issue of tawheed. Also, avoid seeking popularity or notoriety. Avoid it. There's a difference between becoming famous and not seeking fame versus seeking fame. Imam al-Ghazali calls it hubbul jah. It's the love of prestige. It's the love of wanting to be famous. That, oh, I'm known for this. I'm known for that. I want to be famous. I want to be known. This is a spiritual sickness. Then sometimes in activism, it's not even about the cause anymore. It ends up being about a self-fulfilling thing for the nefs and to be seen and be known. And I've seen this so much when people don't know how to pass the mic. They're not the most qualified for the issue. Maybe they're not the best spokesperson, spokesman, or spokeswoman for the issue. But they're known. The media goes to them first. They want to organize the rally. They go on CNN or Democracy Now. Then, oh, that's the person. Oh, and then they're famous. And then when people cheer on this sister or this brother, it just feeds their ego even more and makes it worse. It's feeding the monster. So instead of seeking fame, seek to be obscure. And if you become famous or known, it's a test. Don't seek it out, it's a test. Notoriety, fame is a test. I can tell you as someone who has a little public profile, the amount of death threats I receive. There's nothing fun about that. There's nothing fun about having informants coming to you trying to set you up. There's nothing fun about being smeared in national media. Trust me. Don't seek it out. It's a fitna. And the last part, and part of our spiritual self-care, is dhikrul maut. Remember death. Inshallah, this helps us with our wara, of being scrupulous with our actions and our activism. Remember death. Hence, the Prophet ﷺ at one time told his companions not to visit the maqbara, but then he encouraged them to visit the cemeteries. Why? To remember death. Because everyone at some point in time is going to be lowered into that hole. Zain al-Abidin, the beginning of a poem, Ali ibn Hussein, may Allah be well pleased with him, and his father and his grandfather. He said in a line of poetry, the Gharib, the stranger, is not the stranger in Sham or El Yemen. The stranger is not the stranger in greater Syria or Yemen, but the stranger is the strange one who was put in the kafan and lowered into the grave. Right? We're all travelers. So remember death. None of us are going to live forever in this dunya. That's another false saying. YOLO, you only live once. No, we live more than once. وَآخِرَتُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. So that's my advice. Let us try to study our deen. Right? Spiritual self-care. Establish our obligatory prayers. And try to institute our sunnah. Get spiritual guide. Be very careful about the company that we keep. Have a daily litany. And remember death frequently. Inshallah, if we do this, it will improve our activism and there will be barakah on our activism, where we can have a few people, through the blessing of Allah, can accomplish a lot with His permission. But it's not about numbers, trust me. Not about numbers. With that, I conclude. We've been speaking for a while. I know that we have food. We want the food to get cold. Is there anything that I covered today about spiritual self-care or anything else relating to coalitions, the adab of enjoying good for being evil, its shurut or conditions, the definition of justice according to the Sharia, anything that I covered? I can go over that, but tafadhal, bismillah, brother.
You covered like when you follow like a murshid, you should have like a basic understanding of like that, or you should like learn a little bit about that. What about aqidah? Like, does a regular person, should they pursue knowledge about aqidah, or?
So the first step, thank you. Do you hear the question, sisters? If you get a spiritual guide, you know your fallen eye, but also study aqidah. Number one, the first obligation for us in this deen is to have some basic understanding about the fundamental creed of Islam. This is why, subhanAllah, there's a wisdom of the madhab of studying fiqh. I've only seen this in the Maliki madhab overwhelmingly. That in the muqaddimah, or the beginning of the text, before even talking about fiqh tahara, they all start off with what is the basics that you must believe to be a proper Muslim. This is in Al-Akhdari, Al-Ashmawiyya, Muqtasir Khalil, all of these books, Risala ibn Abi Zayd al-Qirawani, all of these texts, it starts off first with Aqidah. Right? Because the first obligation of وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah said, I did not create jinn nor men except to worship me alone. The first obligation is that we must come to study to know Allah. We have to know Allah and what cannot be attributed to Him before we can even worship Him properly. Right? If we think Allah is in a location, for instance, how could we worship Allah properly? If we think Allah has some sort of weakness, do we actually know Allah to actually have a tawakkul on Allah, to depend on Allah? All of that starts with aqidah, right? That's the first thing that we have to study. Then the second thing is our basic day-to-day religious responsibilities, starting off with fiqh tahara, the fiqh of ritual purity and salah, because that's the first thing we're going to be questioned about on the day of judgment. If our prayers in order, then inshallah, everything else is in order. If our prayers, if we're not making even our 5 prayers and making them properly, other things are going to be messed up. So so we should at least study with a teacher some proper aqidah, some basic fiqh. And this is also how, if we understand our some basic aqidah and also basic fiqh, like halal, haram, then we can't get fooled by the fake sheikh, or we can't get fooled by Peter Sab, or Urdu term, right? The fake sheikh, the fake peer, or you won't fall for any shenanigans. Like I saw a video of this woman who came for ruqya for this fake sheikh, he pulled some fake toy gun with like a little like red dot in it, like she thought she had a jinn. So you fall into under the sway of a fake sheikh. I'm serious about it. I'm not making that video up, but we got some charlatans running around here. We got fake sheikhs, and they'll tell you about they give you a super duper dhikr. If you say this, it's even better than what the Prophet ﷺ taught, or it's better than reading Quran. If you read this one salawat, right, it's 1,000 times better than reading Al-Fatiha and all this mumbo jumbo goofball stuff. Goofyism. Right, then, but so you need to have some of that prerequisite knowledge to even be an activist. You should do that. If you don't even know that, learn that first before trying to be an activist and save the world. Your first obligation is our first obligation is to try to learn our day-to-day obligations so we can be right with Allah, because Allah has the first haqq over us, the first right. Not the activist world, not people anywhere else. So we love them, but we have to get ourselves right. Allah knows best. Are there any other questions? This studying, by the way, is even more incumbent upon us too, by the way. And we learn adab through seeing the proper teacher. See, when you grow up in a Muslim country, you're in a Muslim environment, there are certain things that you learn just by going to school there and in the environment. Here is much different. Many of us went to public schools. Even some of us who went to Islamic schools were miseducated because the Islamic studies teachers themselves didn't have proper ijazah. Right? I know of cases like this. Of schools. No, Zayd is good. Zayd has a father. Zayd has a father who taught him, but he knows what I'm talking about. MashaAllah. And my son's over here, that's why I said that. But no, so if we're like, MashaAllah, if we're in Jordan or Yemen, you know what I mean, we're in Karachi or somewhere like that, then we're going to go to school and we're going to learn some things. I mean, not unless we're like in some elite circle, we're around some materialists. We're going to learn some things about adab and learn some things about basic belief in Islam, just from growing up, being in school there and being in the environment. But here is different. We actually have to seek it out more here. And there's a greater thawab for us here, by the way, by doing that. And what I've learned is, by going to some of these places, for those who are actually here and study hard, you may actually know more about Islam than many of your peers who are university age in Muslim majority countries when you apply yourself, because you actually sought it out. You actually went to go study it formally with a proper teacher, right? But there's a basic Islamic literacy in most Muslim countries, Senegal or Mali or the Maghreb. You know, there's basic Islamic literacy. Alhamdulillah. I just talked to her brother today, so he's going to go in January for 4 months and go study in Morocco. Alhamdulillah, it's good. It's good. Alhamdulillah. Sisters, any questions, comments? Ready to eat? Khair, inshallah, we will conclude with this. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن تواليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي ويقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من وليت ولا يعز من أتيت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت ولك الحمد على ما قضيت نستغفرك يا ربنا ونتوب إليك ونؤمن بك ونتوكل عليك. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الفقر إليك يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك ربنا أفقنا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في غزة وفلسطين ولبنان وعراق واليمن وفي كل مكان يا أكرم الأكرمين يا أكرم الأكرمين يا أكرم الأكرمين فرجنا المسلمين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق والصبر.
Assalamu alaikum.